did it. We finally fucking did it. We are finally covering a book that I haven't fucking read! I have watched the movie for it. I'm not going to count that, though, because we are finally covering a book that I haven't read. We're finally approaching those books. This week's book is going to be Batman, Year One, by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli, with colors by Richmond Lewis. So I don't know how, but this will be the second week in a row that I am covering a Batman story that has two individual stories within it that play out at the exact same time while being intercut, one of which is a character discovering a new world that they have never really stepped into while writing about it in their journal, and the other being about Batman discovering who he truly is. But let's talk about it. Now, I'm not gonna lie, this is yet another book that I primarily bought because of the artwork. I really like this style of artwork. I have a very special soft spot for superheroes who aren't particularly drawn like Adonises. I love it when superheroes are drawn with a lot more subtle musculature, when characters are drawn a lot more like real people with folds and wrinkles, and not everybody is this perfect depiction of humanity. And David Mazzucchelli's art matches that perfectly. Also, this is like my definitive design for Batman. Whenever I see him in any media, this is the design I want him to look like. Because I love this sort of completely matte black cowl, the bigger white eyes than his actual eyes. I love the gray suit with the big black bat symbol. I love the art in this book. Now, this is written by Frank Miller, and I'm gonna be honest, I am like 50-50 on how Frank writes Batman. I have read The Dark Knight Returns, and I know that that was, again, a very metaphorical story, but when I read The Dark Knight Returns, I automatically felt a little weird about the writing of Batman in this darker, more broken up style. And I've realized that there is a very Frank Miller way of writing things. Nobody really speaks in complete sentences. People speak in broken up sentences that go for multiple boxes, and there are also sections of sentences that are repeated ad infinitum. I don't really know if this book plays into that, but I'm not really sure what I'm going to be getting into in terms of the Frank Millerisms of this book. I will also say this is part of, for lack of a better term, the Millerverse, which is a very specific run of comics that all tie into one interconnected universe of Batman comic. I'm gonna be real, I kind of feel like that's a little bit of an excuse to be able to write characters a certain way that is outside of their usual writing pattern. But there are themes that are echoed throughout all three books. There are repeated symbols that are shown that appear in all three like major Batman books, which are Dark Knight, Year One, and All-Star Batman, that kind of show the slow deterioration of the character. Or more, it's kind of a bell curve of going from a normal man to a psychotic god to a normal man, and then back to a psychotic god again. I am excited to read this book, if only because I have such a respect for the artwork. I really want to know if it captures that sort of everyman feel, because I remember that Frank Miller does, like, grimy, dirty, the world is terrible sort of writing again, and Batman entering Gotham for the first time, I feel is going to hit that, like, right on the head. I also feel like this, if I remember correctly, this had a very, very big influence on the Batman, and I feel like it's going to capture a lot of the same vibes, especially with the gray suit, black cowl, dark Gotham. He's very much in his first little trial period of being Batman. I am excited to read it because I am excited to relive that sort of glee. So I am going to go and read this real quick, and I will come back with my initial thoughts before I start the synopsis. So I'll be right back. Okay, I just got done reading Batman Year One. Let's talk about it. Off the jump, I went into that expecting that it was going to feel a lot like The Batman, and it turns out that it was a lot more like Batman Begins. Which makes sense. Batman Begins originally started its life as an adaptation of Batman Year One. I really enjoyed that story. That was a really good introduction for Batman, which makes sense because it was also supposed to be the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths. That was supposed to be the origin of Batman. This is supposed to be his official origin post-Crisis on Infinite Earths, where DC rebooted its continuity for the first time. I will say that it feels a little fast-paced. It feels like it takes place over about a year, and the original comic was only 4 issues. So I feel like a couple of the storylines go pretty f***ing quick. You gotta be paying attention. Honestly, this felt a lot more like a Jim Gordon story than a Batman story. It's not 100% through Jim Gordon's eyes. It is still a story that takes place through both Batman and Jim Gordon's world and worldview. But a lot more focus is put on Jim Gordon being a new cop in Gotham City at the exact same time as the Batman is introduced. I think that this story plays really well as an updated origin for Batman. I will say that as a canon version of Batman, Batman is very military-minded, is the way that I would put it. He talks a lot about the enemy and the war and we're going to the enemy's home base, and it's a lot more militaristic version of Batman, which does keep in line with a lot of versions of the character, but I don't know if I 100% agree with it being the canon version. I will say that the artwork holds up just as good as I thought it was going to. It is beautiful, it is gorgeous, it looks exactly like how I would imagine a darker, more realistic Batman would be. I really like this book. I am gonna go and write the synopsis so that we can discuss it a little bit further. And I can give you the breakdown of the story. The synopsis should probably be pretty quick. Like I said, not a ton of very complex things happen in this story. It's a pretty simple overall telling. I mean, this spoiler-free synopsis will probably be like 4 sentences. Don't hold me to that. I really like this book, and I'm excited to talk about it. So I will see you guys in a minute. All right, I am back. I have written the synopsis. I have watched the animated movie. Let's talk about it. So before I get any farther, I just finished the animated movie like a couple of hours ago. If you want to take in this story, just save yourself the time, read the book. Honestly, I watched the movie after rereading it, and to be perfectly honest, it blows it out of the water completely. The movie removes a lot of the internal dialogue, which is like how at least 45% of the story is conveyed. It changes the color palette at a lot of very key moments, which ultimately changes the meaning. The denseness of the art, the way that things are rendered is so dramatically different that it really gives you a different interpretation of how everything looks. Also, you don't get the passage of time very as well as you do in the book. Honestly, I know I said that it felt a little bit rushed before, but the movie doesn't feel rushed, but it's kind of hard to get a sense of time. Like, they show the dates the same way that the book does, but it doesn't come across as well in the movie as it does in the book. Just read the book. It takes a little bit more time, barely, and you get the better version of the story. The only real thing that I can give is that the voice actors that they chose for Gordon and Batman are perfect. Gordon, Batman, and Loeb sound exactly how I would want them to sound, and I would even extend that to Selina Kyle. The Catwoman voice that they got is really well. Commissioner Gordon is voiced by Bryan Cranston, which most people would know as Walter White from Breaking Bad, and he is just astounding. He's perfect. He sounds exactly how I would like Gordon to sound.
At the end of the day, when you take down another cop, they treat you like any other low-life scumbag.
I will say he sounds a little old for this version of Gordon that's supposed to be a lot younger than our usual version, but I still think that it was really well done. Batman is actually voiced by Ben McKenzie, who most people would probably know because he played Gordon in Gotham, which is just a hilariously ironic twist of fate. Selina Kyle is played by Eliza Dushku. She does an amazing job as Selina Kyle in this. I really enjoyed all of their performances, but outside of the performances, I would say watch the movie if you feel like it, but if you really want to get this book, I would say just read it. Other things before we get into the synopses. The more I have sat with this book, the more I have become comfortable just saying this is Gordon year 1 more than it is Batman year 1. It really is through the eyes of Gordon more than it is through the eyes of absolutely anybody else, or really anything else, especially Batman. You see Batman's first couple of adventures, ? It's really just Batman's golden age career of taking on the mob, taking on street level enforcers and that sort of thing, which isn't inherently bad, but it is a lot more Gordon focused than it is Batman focused, which I don't really think is a bad thing. I just think that that's something that you should probably be aware of as you're going into the book. Other than that, I don't really think that there's a lot to go over before getting into before you read and the synopses of the book. So honestly, I think we're good. I think we're good. So let's get into everything you need to know before you read Batman Year One. Number 1. This book was explicitly made to be the new origin story of Batman following DC's first big reboot in 1986, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Number 2. This story is also canon in Frank Miller's Millerverse, designated as Earth 31 in DC's canon, which is a string of mostly Batman-related comics written by Frank Miller, starting with Batman Year One, that also includes Superman Year One, All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder, The Dark Knight Returns, The Dark Knight Strikes Again, Dark Knight 3 The Master Race, The Dark Knight Returns The Last Crusade, and The Dark Knight Returns The Golden Child. Also, questionably Spawn Batman. Number 3. This universe is almost completely retroactive, with All-Star in Year One originally being written as one-shots and then later added to the canon of Earth 31, and falls apart almost immediately when looked at too hard. Number 4. With this story being a reboot of Batman's beginnings, Miller has no baseline to start from, complete creative freedom. Batman has to be Batman by the end, don't do anything crazy, and that's about it. So if something in this story doesn't line up with what you know as established canon, it's probably because this book essentially was crafting what would be the established canon from 1986 until DC's next big reboot, and debatably beyond that. Number 5. In all reality, while the story focuses on both of them, this is a lot more of a Gordon book. Most of the story focuses on him and his life, and Batman kind of just happens in the background. So don't be surprised if it seems like some important Batman world building seems to be left out. Alright, now that you are as well informed as you could possibly be before going into this book, here is the spoiler-free synopsis of Batman Year One. Bruce Wayne and Jim Gordon, two figures who would change Gotham at its very core, arrive in Gotham City on the exact same day. Over the course of the next year, they will both encounter and overcome Gotham's deep-seated corruption, as well as their own personal battles. Jim challenging the justice system from within, and Bruce becoming something much darker. This origin of Batman as we know him will tie these two's fate together forever and change Gotham City in ways it never thought possible. You know, every single time I do a reading of one of those, I realize that I'm really just writing a blurb for the book that doesn't really give away any of the reasons that people are going to actually watch the video and read the book. So honestly, I debate the reason that I put that in every single time. My TikTok roots are showing, truly. Now that you have the spoiler-free version, now that you have all of the information that you need to know before going into it, here is the synopsis of Batman Year One. So, just a quick heads up before we actually start the video. There is a character in this story named Brandon, spelled Brandden, and I accidentally call him Braden throughout the entire video. So, anytime I say Braden, just know I am talking about Captain Brandon, and that's on me. My apologies. January. Both Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne arrive in Gotham City on the same day. Lieutenant Gordon, arriving by train, and his family, his wife and unborn child, have been transferred here after Gordon ratted on a dirty cop back in Chicago, being punished for his actions by being sent to one of the most corrupt cities in America. He is picked up by Detective Flass, an extremely dirty cop who has been sent by Commissioner Loeb, the pop culture-obsessed head of the GCPD, who has been under investigation repeatedly for corruption by Assistant DA Harvey Dent, to show him how this city really works. Bruce, on the other hand, arrives by plane, having finally returned after 12 years abroad. 12 straight years of training for his mission. A mission that he wastes no time on starting. February. Bruce slowly trains, confirming his readiness to himself to begin his mission, but can't help but feeling that something is missing. Gordon has quickly made enemies at the precinct. His morals are upsetting the other cops, who believe that not only is he not being a team player, but that he's upsetting the way things work around here. Flass and Loeb devise a plan to set him straight in the coming month while Loeb is out of town. March. Gordon is jumped in a parking garage by 4 masked men with baseball bats, who beat Gordon just badly enough that he won't have to go to the hospital. They tell him that this is a warning, and threaten his wife and unborn child. As they leave, Gordon recognizes one of their voices. Flass. Bruce prepares for his first night of reconnaissance. He puts on a light disguise and walks the streets for over 20 blocks to the East End. Against his better judgment, he confronts a pimp chastising one of his extremely young girls. A fight breaks out, and Bruce is ganged up on and ultimately stabbed by the very girl that he was trying to protect. They are not scared of him. No one is scared of him. The police show up to break up the fight, shooting Bruce in the shoulder before he even has a chance to move, and taking him into custody. Bleeding out from both the gunshot and the stab wound, Bruce blacks out, and when he wakes up in the back seat of a cop car, he causes it to crash so that he can escape, pulling the 2 cops out with him. Barely returning to the manor, Bruce asks a bust of his father for help in how he can do what he has planned for so long. How can he make them fear him? Bruce experiences what is possibly a hallucination of a large bat breaking through the window and landing on the bust of his father.
Yes, Father. I shall become a bat.
Gordon has found out from dispatch where Flass and his gang went after brutalizing him. Sitting in the driveway with his lights off, he watches as they all leave the house party drunk. When Flass finally leaves, Gordon tails him until they are secluded and alone and rams him off the road with his car. He tosses Flass a baseball bat and then proceeds to beat him, just badly enough so that he'll stay out of the hospital. He then strips him, ties him up, and leaves him there in the snow to be found later. He'll live, and he won't tell anybody, but he'll know to never do anything against him or his wife ever again. April. Gordon has started to make a name for himself as a sort of hero cop. The press love him, and after he single-handedly handles a hostage situation, publicly embarrassing the jackbooted SWAT captain Braden, he is loved even more. In private, though, Gordon hates his job and feels terrible guilt about bringing a child into this city that he has forced them into. The Batman has begun to stalk the night. Bruce is still learning. He is still an amateur, almost dropping a kid off of a building, but the visage is working. The criminals are scared. Scared enough that people are starting to notice. May. The police are now on the hunt for the Batman. Over the past 5 weeks, he has slowly fought his way up from the street-level sellers to the major distributors and their collaborators, racking up 78 counts of assault in the process. A few days later, Batman stalks out at dinner, hosted by Gotham's criminal elite. In attendance are some councilmen, Commissioner Loeb, and gangsters like Carmine the Roman Falcone. All but the commissioner, who coincidentally keeps turning down Gordon's requests for more assistance on the Batman case, are worried about the growing bat problem. But Loeb believes that the Batman has more pros than cons. Crime is down. The people have a hero. And that means they're not looking too hard at the dealings of the people in that room anymore. Just then, a smoke grenade comes through the window and the wall explodes.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have eaten well. You have eaten Gotham's well. Its spirit. From this moment on, none of you are safe.
The next day, Loeb makes catching the Batman Gordon's #1 priority. June. The police have started to try to set traps for the Batman, staging crimes with officers to try and draw him out, but to no avail. Batman knows all of the officers and can see the traps for exactly what they are. Batman ties up and threatens Carmine Falcone, sinking his Rolls Royce into the river, causing the Roman to order the Batman's death. Batman also starts to work with Assistant District Attorney Harvey Dent in secret. Gordon has started to work down a list of suspects for the Batman, the first, ironically, being Harvey Dent, which goes nowhere. Harvey having an alibi for all of Batman's dates and times. Sergeant Essen,
The young woman who was Gordon's new partner suggests that perhaps Bruce Wayne fits all of the descriptors and might be their man, before the car is nearly sideswiped by a speeding truck. For some reason or another, the driver cannot stop, and the truck is barreling towards an old woman in the road. Gordon pulls up beside and jumps into the truck, trying to grab the wheel from the driver. However, at the last second, Batman swoops down from a rooftop and saves the old woman in the road, the truck smashing into a wall and Gordon hitting the ground hard. When he wakes up, Essen has Batman at gunpoint, telling Gordon that she's already called for backup, before Batman disarms her and knocks her to the ground. Gordon tries to stop him, but passes out again due to his head wound. Gordon wakes up as backup arrives. He tells them that Batman went down a nearby alley before checking on Essen. One of the officers gets a shot off into Batman's leg before he jumps through a window of an abandoned building, which is quickly surrounded by police. Gordon radios the commissioner, who has apparently already gotten clearance to firebomb the building and to send in a SWAT team led by Braden to bring the Batman back dead. A helicopter drops the first bomb, blowing the roof off of the building and igniting the thermite in Batman's belt, causing him to abandon it. He escapes into a basement to wait out the bombing. After the bombs have stopped, the SWAT team goes in, not taking any prisoners. Half of them find the basement where Batman was, but he traps them inside with a log before knocking them out with a gas grenade. While the other half come to rescue their team, Batman activates a device on his boot before engaging with the police. He knocks out Braden with a blow dart, and all of the rest haphazardly open fire, accidentally hitting some officers outside. The bullets weaken a beam enough for Batman to kick it out and drop the ceiling on the SWAT team before sending one of them, an especially mean one that tried to shoot a stray cat for absolutely no reason that Batman then had to save, I might add, through the wall. It's then that the device that Batman used becomes useful. It was an ultrasonic device used to attract every bat in the city, which he uses as cover in his escape, stealing a motorcycle and riding off, at some point losing the cops. Gordon discovers later that apparently a three-piece suit had been stolen from a local tailor during the raid, with payment for it mysteriously left on the counter. A few days later, Gordon calls around trying to find Bruce Wayne, as he is now the prime suspect in their case. However, he apparently had a nasty accident while skiing in Switzerland and broke his arm and both of his legs. Essen points out how easy it would be for Bruce to have those casts put on to cover up the bullet wounds that Batman mysteriously got in the same places. Gordon has to remind himself to think of her as just a cop. Bruce is actually in Switzerland skiing, giving him some time to reflect on the raid and realizing that if he is to continue, he needs an ally on the force, deciding that that must be Jim Gordon. Gordon has been working a lot more late nights since the raid, and most of those late nights, he and Sergeant Essen, go and get coffee from a local diner on the way home. One of those nights, it starts to rain as they look for a cab, the two taking shelter in a doorway. In the closeness, the two kiss. Wordlessly, the two part, Essen taking the first cab to arrive. August. Inspired by the Batman, and having spent all of her money on the costume, Selina Kyle suits up as Catwoman for the first time and leaps into the night. Yeah, right. I guess I haven't really mentioned Selina up till this point, have I? In this version, Selina is a leather-clad dominatrix, having worked in the East End before the story begins. She's popped up here and there throughout. She was one of the people who Bruce fought on his first night in disguise. She was in the crowd watching the raid, and from seeing Batman's influence on the city, she gets an idea to become a cat burglar with a very similar gimmick, which is where we see her suit up here. She becomes important later, I promise. On the other side of town, Gordon sits in his bed after yet another fight with his wife, Barbara. He regrets his mistakes. He regrets Sergeant Essen. He regrets the life that he lives. And thinking of all the good that he has seen him do, he questions if Batman is really as bad as he's been told. September. Gordon and Essen's affair grows deeper. They are in love, and consequently, Essen has requested a transfer. It's the only thing to do. Gordon catches a narcotics dealer named Jefferson Skeevers, only for him to almost immediately be released on bail. Harvey Dent, confusingly, doing nothing to stop it. Batman finds Skeevers in a hotel room and,
You can never escape me. Bullets don't harm me. Nothing harms me. But I know pain. I know pain. Sometimes I share it with someone like you.
convinces him to rat on Detective Flass to the police. Upon hearing that Gordon has handed Flass over to Internal Affairs with heaps of evidence courtesy of Skeevers, Flass being a man that knows far too much about all of the corruption going on behind the scenes to be allowed within 100 yards of a lawyer, Commissioner Loeb and Captain Braden threaten Gordon with evidence of his affair with Sergeant Essen, saying that they will leak them to the press that love him so much, and consequently, to his wife. A few days later, Gordon and Barbara go to meet with Bruce Wayne, Gordon having brought her to take her mind off the fact that she's so overdue with the baby. Bruce is seemingly day drinking with some beautiful woman whose name he doesn't know and language he doesn't speak, pretty thoroughly selling that he isn't the ever so noble and disciplined Batman. As Barbara vents her distaste for Bruce to Gordon, he, in a moment of clarity, stops the car in the driveway and tells her about his affair with Sergeant Essen. After 10 minutes, they drive off together. October. Having relieved himself of the only thing being held over his head, Gordon brings in Flass for questioning. Skeevers has agreed to testify against him, and Flass is facing nearly 10 years in prison. Later that same month, Gordon's son is born. November. Catwoman successfully steals Commissioner Loeb's entire pop culture memorabilia collection. However, the credit for this heist is given to Batman, as she was completely unseen. She decides that she's going to give Carmine Falcone a visit and scratch him across the face before stealing some of that fortune of his to prove to the media exactly who she is. That night, she does precisely that, going to the Roman's rooftop bathhouse to catch him off guard. Coincidentally, Batman also came there to do some reconnaissance on the Roman's operation that night. In the middle of collecting vital information, the Roman is cut off by a struggle on the rooftop. Catwoman is caught, and to make sure that she isn't killed, Batman takes out all of the men with batarangs before leaving Selina to do her business. Unfortunately, Batman wasn't able to hear what the Roman was planning, only that they are trying to avoid bad publicity. With murder and blackmail then being ruled out, the former because it would attract said bad publicity, and the latter because there's no way they haven't tried that already, Bruce pieces together the next morning that this most likely means that they are going to threaten Lieutenant Gordon. Bruce roars off on his motorcycle in civilian clothes, the batsuit being reserved for the night. That morning, Loeb calls Gordon in on an assignment far below his pay grade. On the way there, he is almost hit by someone on a motorcycle, speeding in the opposite direction and into his parking garage. Gordon, coming to the sudden realization that the call was simply to get him out of the house, and that this man might be going after his wife and son as payback for not listening to Loeb. He whips back around into his garage, not finding the man on the motorcycle, but rather 4 thugs kidnapping his wife and son, telling him to simply wait for their call. Gordon does not do that. Instead, he drops one of the thugs immediately. The other he gets in the shoulder, catching a bullet of his own as the car carrying his son and the final 2 thugs drives away. Gordon hears a motorcycle start behind him, shooting its driver in the gut before stealing his bike, telling Barbara to get out of there and to call the cops, and speeding off to catch the car. Barbara picks up one of the thugs' guns and holds Bruce at gunpoint, his face hidden by the shadows. Bruce says that she has to trust him and that he won't let her son die. before stealing a bicycle and taking off. Gordon is able to stop the car by shooting out one of its tires, the car crashing into a bridge. Gordon parks the bike and runs to investigate. The final thug bursts out of the car with Gordon's son in one hand and a knife in the other and attacks Gordon, knocking off his glasses. In the fight, they are pressed against the railing and Gordon's son is dropped from the bridge. Gordon dives to catch him, the thug falling with him. Luckily, Bruce had made it just in time, diving off the bridge before Gordon and catching his son moments before they hit the ground. Gordon survived the fall, having landed on the final thug, and he thanks the stranger for his help, putting two and two together that this is indeed the Batman. Luckily, he's practically blind without his glasses, and hearing the sirens, advises Batman to flee. December. Flass takes a deal to testify against Commissioner Loeb, who, while probably not going to prison, is in talks with the mayor to resign. Gordon is promoted to captain, and he and Barbara are now seeing a marriage counselor. Gordon goes to the rooftop one night to smoke his pipe and to meet with a friend about a case he's got. Someone's threatened to poison the Gotham Reservoir. He calls himself the Joker. And that is Batman, Year 1.
All right. As a Batman origin, I don't think that that is bad at all. I will say that it is more of a Batman as a figure in Gotham origin more than it is a Batman / Bruce Wayne origin. Because even though this was set up as sort of the first canonical story that Batman would have in this new universe, it really doesn't really get into the origin all that much. It kind of assumes that you already know. Because of course you already know. You're a Batman, you're reading a Batman book, and Batman is one of DC's most popular characters, even at the time. This was a post-Dark Knight Returns world. Batman was huge. So it kind of goes off the assumption that you already know Batman's origin story. The gun, the pearls, the two parents dead in the alleyway. They really only cover that in Batman's brief flashback in issue 1, and it's all kind of like it's very slideshow-esque. They don't really go into a lot of detail with it. I watched a video essay by a YouTube creator called Smokey's Videos that was actually on how Frank Miller writes Batman, and they did a section in this video on Batman Year 1, and they point out the fact that the bat in that scene is also in black and white, the same way that the flashback to his parents are, which is why I said that it might be a hallucination in the synopsis, because it makes a lot more sense for that to not actually exist in that scene. It to be another aspect of that flashback, another part from his history that influences him now. Kind of a memory that gets unlocked as he's desperately trying to find a reason to move on. Or not to move on, but to keep going, really. Reading that section, it really feels like there is an assumption that you know who Batman is, that you know how a Batman story goes, and that you know how this is going to go by the end of it. And I actually kind of like it for that, because it doesn't really hold your hand and go, all right, well, this is Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is a millionaire, and he watched his parents die when he was a little kid, and we're going to show you every single aspect of that. It really just goes, you know who Batman is, you know who Jim Gordon is, but now that DC needs a new origin, here is what we're going to be going forward with. And it tells a very concise little mob story in the middle of that. Or not even really a mob story, more of a crime story in the middle of that, which is why I think that it's really focused around Jim Gordon, and why I really appreciate that it's focused around Jim Gordon. It plays a lot closer to like a crime movie, like a crime novel of this detective slowly figuring out who this mysterious figure in his city is, while also discovering how corrupt this city he's been moved to is, and taking down the corruption from inside. I thought that was really well handled. And I also think that it makes a lot of sense for somebody like Jim Gordon. And it makes a lot of sense for this story, that even though it is a Batman Year 1 story, everyone kind of assumes that they know how this story goes, especially Year 1. It's not that people don't need that first year of Batman's adventuring, or that wouldn't make a good story, But I feel like Frank Miller in this book really understood that everybody kind of knows what happened with Batman in the first year. Like, it's a pretty hardy assumption that everybody would probably know. That it's like, yeah, he took on crime. He came back to fight street level crime, and that's what he did. Until shit started getting weird, that's kind of what he did. And playing off of that, characters like Catwoman, Selina in this, shows Batman's immediate influence on the city, that crime reacts to the hero that it has. That the weird shit that Gotham produces doesn't exist yet. There is a costumed villain that appears within Batman's first year, and it makes a lot of sense that it doesn't appear until the hero appears and is more ridiculous than the crime. And that's even shown with Joker being the first villain that shows up after Batman's first year. He has shown up, he has shown himself to the world, he's caused a stir, he's gotten a lot of attention, and now that people know he has a lot of attention, other people want in on that, which is really very obviously highlighted with Selina. Selina actively wants to chase that glory, even though she's a cat burglar. Like Holly, her partner, points out that, like, hey, you don't want to be caught. Like, you did a good job. You did your job correctly, and nobody knew you were there. That's exactly what you should want. But Selina wants that Batman-like attention. She wants that spotlight on her, which is why she chases, that's why she goes after Falcone, that's why she scratches Falcone. It shows, if not Frank's interpretation of how Batman's world works, it gives evidence to the line of thinking that Batman kind of creates his villains. If not creates his villains, gives a reason for them to exist. And I think in this story, I think they did that really well, and they did that with a really deft hand. I also really like the reintroduction of characters that you already know in this specific context. I don't really think that any characters were handled incorrectly, or like characters that weren't handled the way that they would be portrayed later, with the exception of Batman. I feel like, well, I'll get into how I feel about the Batman in the story. It's not bad, it's just, it's different. But all of the characters are kind of shown in a different lens. Like, Commissioner Gordon is this bastion of good. He is the symbol of a good cop in Gotham. And this book shows him that he is still that noble person, but he is still a cop in Gotham. So he will play dirty if he has to. They reference the fact that he is not 100% noble. The line that he says, I don't know what it's referencing. I could be wrong. It could be referenced to some war. It could be referenced to having to fight people. But he says, it's been years since I've had to take down a Green Beret. That might be something that he encountered on his noble cop journey. I know that he's shown as a pretty noble person throughout the entirety of this, with the exception of, you know, the obvious but he's shown to be a fairly noble good cop all the way through, up until he cheats on his wife with Sergeant Essen, which adds that layer of dark to his character, which, given it's Frank Miller, a lot of people have given the critique that his darkness is usually kind of this middle schooler's interpretation of dark. The later it gets into his career, it adds this level of dark to Gordon that wasn't there before. I think that's really my point. And I don't dislike that. I know it changes the character, and it definitely will change people's opinion of the character, but I don't 100% dislike it for Gordon. I think that it could have some positive effects in terms of just depth of the character, that he's not just this perfectly good cop. He also has these darker sides. He also has his home life's not perfect. He has fucked up before. He will fuck up again. And I think that's at least appropriate for this level, or this book specifically. If I want to talk about a character change that I don't 100% agree with, I feel like Batman is too militaristic in this. Not entirely. Like, he's not Dark Knight Returns levels of militaristic, but just the language that he uses feels a little weird to me. I know that Batman is usually shown as having like his ultimate mission. This is his one goal, this is what he will set out to achieve, it's the never-ending battle, all of that. But I feel like his wording specifically in this feels a lot like a soldier, and I don't really feel like Batman usually is portrayed to be a soldier in his mind. He tells people that he's a soldier, but he is still a vigilante and a hero in his own mind. Or at least how he acts is a lot closer to a vigilante and a hero, and a lot less like a soldier. The specific verbiage of like, it took 20 blocks to get to the enemy camp. And he's talking about going to the East End where there's a lot of prostitution rings. That feels a little weird to me.
That's all it is. Or like the when he's in the plane where he's saying, what's the words? Yeah, I should have taken the train. I should be close. I should see the enemy. I don't know if I particularly like him framing criminals and only calling them the enemy. Especially because I mentioned it in my last video a little bit, that I feel that Batman is based in a certain level of hope. He's not based in 100% punishment. He's not a punish first sort of character. He believes that criminals are a superstitious and cowardly lot, and he needs to scare them because they need something to fear the same way that he feared the criminal who took his parents. That is a certain level of punishment, I'll grant you, but he does not view every single bad guy as an enemy combatant. Not like he doesn't view it as the same way that a soldier views the person at the other end of the gun. He ultimately feels that people can change and that people deserve a second chance. Maybe not Joe Chill, maybe not in this like early version of Batman. And I feel like that's why it's kind of excusable, is that he might have thought like this when he started, and the longer that he went, the more that changed. I can definitely see that in the aspects of like the way he talks about the kid that he almost knocks off of the roof. When he catches him, he says that he's a kid. He can't be more than 15. I'm not a killer. I'll never be a killer. Like that sort of mentality really shows me that he eventually might warm up to treating criminals a lot more compassionately, like he does later in life. But I feel like even in this early version, he's very, very militaristic to a sense that it feels a little weird. I also think that they do a good job at portraying his like weirdly superhuman strength by having him like punch a box of bricks in half and kick a tree down. But it did feel a little bit out of place for like the rest of the world being so like normal. I know that tree was dead. It was the middle of winter. It was a dead tree. And he did like, we don't know how long he had been punching that cube of bricks, but it still felt a little strange opening up with. I did like how Batman was written, how he talked in this, which is always a very contentious point for me because I feel like Batman speaks a certain way. And I feel like he did really well in this. He makes a lot of speeches, but all of his speeches are very much like a villain. He talks like a bad guy for the bad guys. Especially his like, I know pain, and sometimes I share it with people like you. I like that. That was really good. But he also isn't afraid to make some corny ass lines like, you're the guy who tried to kill that that cat, and then he punches a dude through a wall. That's nice. I feel like that is very Batman-esque, and I like that. Especially because Batman is so non-humorous throughout this. I also feel like Frank Miller really understands how Brucey Wayne should act, because he does speak the way I imagine Bruce Wayne speaks. When he has Gordon over, when he has Barbara over, and he's talking about the woman that he's with, he's still classy. He was still raised in a mansion and everything, but he does give off that I don't really care about you sort of energy that is 100% an act, but I feel like he did it very, very well, and at least wrote it very, very well in this. Every character has their own voice, and they sound very much like their own fleshed out people, and I really like that. Everybody's got their own vocal tics, everybody's got their own things that they do, and I really do enjoy that a lot. And speaking on characters' individuality and the things that make them separate, the art in this was just as good as I remembered. It is incredible. Every character looks exactly how they should look. I really like the fact that characters don't always look perfect. They don't always look like, not even just the fact that they're not all muscly and rippling pectorals and perfect Adonises of people, but even down to the fact that like when Gordon tries to pick up Harvey Dent's barbell, he gets like a double chin, like he knocks into himself a little bit. I think that's good. I think that shows character and that shows humanity in a way that is sometimes not shown. And I really appreciate that. I think that's really nice. Even down to like Batman gets one of those moments. He gets shot in the leg and his face is one of like searing pain that he was not expecting. But on the other side, he's able to, the artist, David Mazzucchelli is able to show the horror of what Batman would look like. And I think that's really emblematic in the costume. I'll say again, this is my favorite Batman costume of all time. I love this suit so much. And the way that it is portrayed in this story is so very good. I love how the cape moves. I love the facial expressions he's able to make with the eyes. I love the lighting on the cape. I love all of the different things that go into this. And I will also say, Richmond Lewis, her coloring is incredible. When I watched the movie, the first thing that I noticed is that the colors were wrong. That it didn't have that stylized look that I really, really wanted from this story. There are shots that are completely cloaked in just one color, and it looks so perfect that you can't change it without losing something. The stark yellows in the scene where Batman is talking to his father, the red when he goes after Skeevers and is like about to torture him. The very specific coloring in this book really, really, really enhances the art to an extent that when it is gone, it changes the story completely. Because the movie doesn't have those colors. It doesn't have those stark colors that it has in this book. They try, but they don't push it that extra little bit, and you feel it instantly. So I think Richmond Lewis's addition to this book is astronomical. I absolutely love what they did. There are moments in the artwork that I personally I have a hard time believing that Frank Miller did not do an undersketch for it. There's one specific thing that comes to mind when Gordon is sitting in the car waiting for Flass to leave the house party. That it's a very Sin City looking shot. And I don't mean that in any negative way. I don't mind that art style all that much, at least not at this point in Frank Miller's career. And I don't even know if he did an underdrawing for it. It could have just been David Mazzucchelli's artwork. But it really does feel like a very Miller shot, to an extent that if Miller was just the writer on that shot, then he must have given excessive detail on how to draw that specific moment. And I think that that's really cool, because it does have a very Miller feel to it. Reading this story as part of Miller's larger extended universe, I don't know if I can believe that the Dark Knight Returns world would spawn from a book like this. Gordon acts very similarly like an older version of this character. I feel like the arc from Batman Year One to All-Star Batman and Robin to Dark Knight Returns is a very stark one. It's a very harsh transition in a character. I was really worried that we were going to get a lot of Millerisms in how people speak, and with the exception of Bruce sometimes, and not even that much, characters don't really speak the way that Miller usually writes characters, with these really broken up thought balloons and these repeated words, which I was really worried that we were going to get. Ultimately, characters speak like they're in a noir novel, don't get me wrong, but they don't speak in a way that doesn't seem believable and doesn't seem like real people speaking. Every way that every character talks sounds like a way that a real human being talks, and it sounds like a way that you would be able to hear them speaking. I did want to add in that there is I don't want to call it a poem, but there is a short comic that is mostly written, I don't know if he also drew it, but mostly written by David Mazzucchelli in the back. That is The Caped Crusader, the Weird Creature of Darkness. And it is a 4-page long kind of indictment of making characters darker. And I really, really appreciated it. I don't know if indictment sounds very harsh. It's a lot more of a step against making characters darker, of going, superheroes are fun and silly, and that is how they always have been, and that is how they always remain. The last line of it is, "This much I know, superheroes are real when they're drawn in ink." And that is after kind of going into the fact that making superheroes more realistic, it doesn't make them better, because superheroes have always been good. They've always been good to read, and adding that dark level of realism to it removes the escapism aspect of it. And I really, really appreciated that backstory. If you're not going to read the rest of this book, read that little 4-page story by David Mazzucchelli. I think it's great. But yeah, I think overall I have gotten most of my thoughts out for this book.
All right, taking a look at the Patreon poll for next episode, it looks like we are going to be covering Earth X by Alex Ross and Jim Krueger. Alex Ross is one of my favorite artists, so I am super, 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 super excited to get into this. I've also really wanted to read this book. It seems like sort of an Elseworlds book, but yeah, I think that is going to wrap up this week's video. So thank you guys for sticking around. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one.
And that is going to be it for this month. I just want to take a moment to thank all of my lovely, lovely patrons over on Patreon. Amanda Barnstead, Andrea Lanowitz, Bill Bro, Brandon Bilbrey, Brandon Laney, Brian Van Vorst, Carol Cowett, Christopher Bosgard, Danny Walker, Dark Nimbus, Devin Iculus, Dee Dee, Dominic Vaculo, Dragonfang, Elizabeth Rush, Fireball Sensei, Gas Boss Gate Light Girl Keep, Have a Heart Tin Man, Jacob Safel, Jasmine Bishop, Jeffrey Aviles, Caitlin Kelly, Caitlin Norman, Kat Q, Kathy Coker, Katie Hawkins, Kieran Wheeler, Magu, Max Baker, Nixie Shimo, Pandora A, Pinchy Mugray, Raymond Villasana, Righteous Duke, Ricky Tiki Davi, Silver Bullets 23, Tangled Web, The Brain Teaser, The Holy Kuroda, Thomas Randolph, Toybox, T.S. Famder, Ultraviolet, and Wofu Badge 2, as well as all of my other lovely patrons over on Patreon. And if you too would like your name read out at the end of every single YouTube video I do on this channel, as well as having the ability to vote on new episodes of the Comic Book Club as they come out, feel free to hop on over to my Patreon and donate at least $15 or more. Or hey, if that's not an option, even $1 helps. So I know in my last compilation I said that this video was probably going to be out by the end of that week. That was before I completely forgot to take this file on the plane with me to New York for NocoCon. So this came out a little bit later than I was hoping. I am hard at work right now on the next episode because I know I was a little bit behind. But I just wanted to say thank you guys for waiting. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys enjoy the next episode. I hope you guys are excited. Thank you guys for sticking around, and I will see you next time.